Welcome back. So in my continuing series of 32 team videos, today I want to talk about 32 players with something to prove coming into this season. And they might be trying to prove that last season wasn't a fluke. They might be trying to prove that they can, stay healthy and contribute and all that. But what I've done is I've reversed the order of the teams from yesterday. So Metro, Atlantic, Central, and Pacific. Or MACP. There you go. Easy, nice way to remember it. All right. Washington, before I go full Michael Scott with this. With Washington, my pick for them was Dylan Strome. So Strome has a real opportunity to jump into a prime spot with Washington and contribute while Backstrom's out, right? Backstrom being out will give opportunities to various players. I'm picking Strome as the one to see how he plays and what kind of production he puts up, because it may decide how much Washington pushes to get Backstrom back in. Like, do you wait till he's 95%, pretty close, or do you say, you know what, we're doing pretty well, and you wait until he's 100% pain-free and good to go? And how guys like Strome play could very well decide that. Pittsburgh, I went with Petrie. So Petrie acquired from Montreal. He had an absolute nightmare of a season last year, and it got better towards the end, but it still wasn't a great year for him. He's looking to prove he can bounce back in Pittsburgh. Of course, Pittsburgh's revamped blue line is going to be taking the spotlight for them a lot this year, and so we'll see how things go with Petrie. On the Philadelphia side of things, a guy with a key season coming up is Konechny. Konechny, his point total's not fantastic last year. I think he's capable of a lot more. I really think he's capable of being a star player in the NHL year in and year out. And so to me, Konechny, and it probably would have been Couturier yet again on the board, but Couturier with an injury and all that, so I'm going with Konechny for this one. There will be some repeats from other lists. Act surprised when you see the name on the board, right? Coming to the New York Rangers, and a player with something to prove this year, for me it's Kakko. Now, I went with a few different guys, basically the whole kid line, really. But Kakko's the one that he really needs to get his points totals up this year. He needs to, show something a little bit more, because while they've kept him and he's under contract and all that, I get the feeling if he has another rough year, he could end up being a guy that the Rangers look to part ways with. But he's still young. He's only 21. Seems crazy to insinuate somebody at 21 is going to a key year, but here we are. It feels like it is for him. For the New York Islanders, I went with their big signing from today, Matt Barzel. A lot of comments about Barzel's not worth it, and looking at his goal totals, and looking at all this, and not looking at the systems that the Islanders have been using, which I think has been holding down the offense for the Islanders. I've argued it for years in reviews, when I talk about them in power rankings, that it feels like their offense is suppressed. So if that is in fact gone, and that's an if, because we don't know that anything's going to change under a new coach, but if Lane Lambert changes things, we could very well see Barzel's totals come up quite a bit. And really, Lou Lamoriello is going to be hoping Barzel produces a little more too. I'm not worried about the goals. I saw a lot of people talking about goals. Barzell's the setup guy. You're looking more at the points and at the assists and that kind of thing. He's not really a goal producer. New Jersey, well, with Dougie Hamilton. Year one for Dougie Hamilton in New Jersey, of course. There are injuries and other things, and just not a fantastic year for Dougie Hamilton. I'm sure he's looking at higher production and the ability to stay healthy for a full 82 this year. So if New Jersey's going to get into the hunt and really push for a wild card spot, it feels like Hamilton's going to have to be a key guy for them. With Columbus, I'm picking somebody I've picked before. Laine. Laine, of course, has to stay healthy, and he's going to be on a line. It looks like with Gaudreau, could be Kent Johnson in the middle, could end up being Sillinger, could be Jenner, but either way, Laine could finally be on a very talented line. It was an argument against how he struggled in Winnipeg, which was he's not playing with really good line mates. When he got to Columbus, well, look at who his line mates are, and he needs to be with really good line mates. Now, he shouldn't have that excuse. And so the production should be excellent. And again, it's going to depend on staying healthy too. For Carolina, it's Barry Kotkaniemi. Kotkaniemi, of course, taken away from the Montreal Canadiens by Carolina last summer. And so Kotkaniemi will be looking to bounce back this year. I did have him in the bounce back video, I believe, as well. But this is a big season for him. It really is. For Carolina, they've invested heavily in the player, and it feels like this is the year where the offense should start to show up for him. For Toronto, it's a big year for Murray. There were various players I could have picked from Toronto, but I'm going with Matt Murray. I think this is a key year for him. He now has a team that's got faith in him. He's got a GM that's got faith in him as well. He's coming out of a situation in Ottawa where, of course, there were struggles. The team ends up waiving him and sending him to the minors. So Murray is looking to have a big statement year this year. And, of course, Samsonov, not really a slouch in net either. So if he doesn't get off to a good start, Samsonov could steal that job from him. So he's got that to prove. And Samsonov, honorable mention to him as well. For Tampa, whether you do or don't believe that Kucherov was hurt so bad as to miss an entire regular season and then come back from the playoffs, whether or not you think there was something nefarious about him being injured for about 30 games last year, Kucherov needs to be healthy for a full year, and Tampa Bay, it feels like with each passing year, there's more of that depth that gets whittled away, right? Which is what the salary cap's kind of designed to do, and Tampa Bay has been fighting gravity for a while, but it feels like this year Kucherov needs to stay healthy. If he has injury problems this year as well, he'll get that injury-prone tag. Once a player's got that, it can be tough to get rid of it. Crosby did, but not everybody's Crosby. So yeah, Kucherov, we'll see whether or not he can stay healthy this year for a Tampa team that may be more reliant on him than they were the other times he's been missing. Ottawa, I went with. So this is one that's interesting to me, and I wanted to talk about this here. Stützle had honestly, Stützle had, I thought, a good year last year. I thought he had a breakout season last year, but as the team's now getting better, it's key that Stützle continues to show that improvement. So while I think he's already had that breakthrough and shown he's a star in the NHL, this is the year where he may become a superstar, and I'm here for it. I think it'd be great if that happens. And so we'll see whether or not that takes place for Ottawa. But he's a key guy for the Sens. For Montreal, one of their new acquisitions, Kirby Doc. Doc, all the right things are being done with him in the preseason. The one thing that I do wonder is that if he continues to struggle in the faceoff circle, shouldn't he be on the wing? If Doc can't play, can't take those faceoffs, either you have a winger take the faceoff and you have him switch out, which is not optimal, or you just move him to the wing. And I would think moving him to the wing might be the best move. But again, we'll see what Montreal does, what Marty St. Louis does. Maybe he doesn't think losing faceoffs is a big deal, right? But it's an area of the game Doc needs to improve. But he also just offensively needs to get back to where it looked like he was progressing once we got to the 2020 playoffs for the Hawks. And he's just never been back to that level again. For Florida, I went with one that... So here's the reason why. So Sam Bennett's in an interesting position. Should be second line center, yep. But Lundell is on this team as well. Lundell's going to improve. That puts a little more pressure on Sam Bennett. Because if Bennett ends up on the third line, his production's going to drop. And of course, if you have him in fantasy, that'd be something to watch, as Lundell threatening to take away his ice time. I think Bennett's good enough to stay on that second line, but we shall see. For Detroit, there's a couple of different ways to look at this. So Jacob Brana wants to stay healthy for one, and two, he needs to show that he can score at the kind of pace that he was at the time of the injury this past season. Brana's stats project out quite well, right? They project out to he could be a 30, a 40 goal scorer, but he's got to stay healthy for a full season. And for Detroit, a team that's right on the cusp of getting better, they don't have the kind of depth, though, that some of the top teams do, so they're going to need more guys to stay healthy. And especially Brana, who on this Detroit team that's got a lot of young players, can be seen as a veteran and maybe look to for some leadership as well. Buffalo, I'm going with Eric Comrey. He's coming off of a pretty good year in Winnipeg, and in Buffalo, he's going to be under fire. He should get more shots against than he was getting in Winnipeg, so we'll see whether or not Comrey really and truly is a starting goaltender this year. For Buffalo, their other option is Craig Anderson, and odds are Comrey's going to get every opportunity that first month of the season. So it's really important he proves himself. For Boston, the returning prodigal son, I guess you could label him, David Krejci, who comes back after a year off in Europe and is going to be looking to show that he's not older and slower as a result. So it is hard to project out, but players after they're 35 years of age, I mean, there is that drop-off that takes place. And for Boston, they're betting that it won't be this year. They've got a lot of expiring contracts. I was looking at expiring contracts again today. A lot of them with the Bruins forwards, including Krejci. So that's another reason why it's a big year for him too, right? If he wants to come back again next year. All right, we get to the West. In Winnipeg, Blake Wheeler loses the captaincy. A lot of talk about changes in the leadership group and all that. Well, when you're the captaincy and there's talk of leadership issue, well, that's directly at you without directly naming him, of course, which bonus isn't going to do. But for Winnipeg, it was a down year. And if they're going to get back into the playoffs, they need Wheeler not just to play well, but to buy in. As the former captain, he needs to buy into everything coming from bonus and show that he's part of this. Whether he's a member of the Jets for this full season or he gets traded or if he's a Jet for the next 3 years, whatever happens, him buying in would be big to helping Rick Bowness out with whatever plan he has. For St. Louis, really, to me, it's a key year for one guy over all the others, and that's Binnington. Binnington's playoff before getting injured was playing very, very well. And his playoff numbers generally pretty good. That 2019 Stanley Cup definitely helps. But regular season, he's been average. To below average at times too. And so Binnington, I think the pressure's on him. Husso's not there now. So now it's really and truly his net. And he's being paid as if it's his net. And I know he has the talent to do it. So can Binnington do that this year? For Nashville, I went back and forth on a couple. I would like to congratulate Cody Glass with making the team opening night because a lot of people, I think, had kind of given up. But I'm going with Matt Duchene. Projections are Matt Duchene drops back from the production he had last year. Over 40 goals last year. But while I'm not going to argue against the idea that he probably produced a little more than he's going to produce this coming season, Duchene, I think, has a lot to prove because he's expected to drop back. And his preseason was 7 points in 2 games thus far. Shows you he really wants to make this work, right? Minnesota. Marc-Andre Fleury is not the same goaltender he was when Vegas picked him up in the expansion draft, but he can still be quite good. And if Minnesota's defense can... I don't know that protect him is the right terminology, but I'll go with that. If they can protect him and he's not facing a lot of top-notch opportunities, I think Fleury could be a really good goaltender for them. He'll need to steal a game here and there, though. And so I think there's some pressure on Fleury, especially with Talbot leaving. I think if Talbot had said, that's fine, we can be 1A, 1B, it's all fine, no problem. I think there'd be less pressure on Fleury, but because they get Gustafsson, a much less experienced goaltender, to come in as his backup, there's a more clear starter-backup relationship there, and so that adds to the pressure on Fleury. It's a key year for him. For Dallas, I'm going with one of their newbies as well, Mason Marchman. Marchman's looked really good in the preseason on a team that hasn't been great in the preseason. Dallas has been middling, which kind of what I'm expecting from them this year. I'm hoping they get above that playoff line, but without Robertson, it's not going to be easy. But Marchman can help. Marchman, if he can produce during the season the way he has so far in the exhibition games, then you look back to last year in Florida, if he can produce like that, even a little bit better, then that would help a lot if Robertson's out for a while. As a Dallas fan, I don't like speaking about Robertson being out. I want him signed, so that conversation goes away. Colorado. Alex Newhook. Looks like he's got the inside track for the second-line center job in Colorado. That would leave Comfer as number 3. Rodriguez probably slots in at 4, I would think. But they do have a lot of centers, and that's key, right? If you're going to be a contender, remain a contender, you can't have too many centers. Centers can play on the wing, but if you got wings playing center, mixed results. But Newhook, if he ends up being the number 2 center, this could be a really big year for him. And if he produces in that role, great. If he doesn't, then that's where Compher can end up stealing his job. So it could be a big year for Newhook. For Chicago, there's a bit of a difference here because Chicago is expected to not be very good. Now, for Andreas Athanasiou, he signs here, and it's just the 1 year deal, right? He and Domi both on 1 year deals, and it feels like they're there for a similar reason. I've talked about Domi, but I want to talk about Athanasiou. Previous video, I talked about Domi. Athanasiou needs to stay healthy, A. B, needs to show he's consistent. He's got speed, he's got skill for days, needs to have that consistent scoring and stay healthy as well. So if he can do that with Chicago, he can either parlay that into another contract next year or potentially end up being moved at the deadline, and Chicago could get more for him if he's playing well. For Arizona, Jacob Chychrun. Whether Chychrun gets moved or doesn't, I feel like it's a key year for him. After last year was not fantastic, he still played well, not as well as he did the year before. And if he has a down year this year, then we're trending in the wrong direction, right? Then the discussions of his $4.6 million cap hit being a huge bargain kind of drops away a bit in the event that his play doesn't get back to where we expect it to be this year. So I think it's a key year for him. For Vegas, I didn't even have to look for Vegas, going to be honest. Eichel was the easy one. Eichel, of course, coming off disc replacement surgery, first NHLer to have it. And based on his play last year, he was okay. And he was good in parts. But he needs to be more than good or okay. He needs to be the fantastic forward that he was for a while there in Buffalo, where he could do the beast mode and play keep away with the puck, and he was just so darn good. Of course, the consistency with that was sometimes lacking, and that post-surgery season I don't think was great. But so far in the preseason, he's looked pretty good. For Vancouver, notice I'm not even looking at the list, because much like with Eichel, I didn't even need to look. Pettersson's a divisive figure in Canuck circles and just in general. Pettersson had a really rough first half last season. He also had part of that is probably due to the wrist injury that he'd had the previous year. So there's the debate about whether or not he's actually a good top six option. Should they move him? All this fun stuff. I have never advocated for moving Pettersson. I'm not going to. But Pettersson definitely needs to show that consistency that he showed in the second half of the season throughout this season. If he does, he can be an 80 to 90 point forward. If he doesn't, then that likely doesn't happen. But yeah, Pettersson would be the guy for me with Vancouver, and I don't know that it's close. I mean, Besser, you could argue, sure, could be a key year, but Pettersson's the bigger star than Besser. All apologies to Brock and all that. For Seattle, this one was pretty straightforward too. It's a big year for Grubauer. In the event that he doesn't have that bounce back year this year, do they buy him out? Like, what does Seattle do if Grubauer has another down year? One down year you can look at and say it's an expansion season. The defense probably left him hung out to dry in some occasions, which is definitely true, but he didn't have a great year either. Both of those things can be true. And so Grubauer, to me, is the guy that Seattle's looking to as the key guy. He is the starting goaltender year two, and if he has another rough year, maybe he's not Seattle's goaltender for that long, right? And then the conversation of that I've seen a lot of, which is that, well, he wasn't that good in Colorado. They just have a really good defense that covered up for him. And I don't agree with that sentiment, but I understand why it's out there. I totally understand why it's out there. San Jose, goaltender as well. Kaapo Kähkönen, it was a year ago? We were talking about him in Minnesota, and I kept saying, I think Kähkönen's going to be the starter there, or at least a 1A, 1B. Him and Talbot, that should be good. And now they're both gone. And he's in San Jose, Kähkönen, and we'll see how he does this year. It's a key year for him, to me, because I still think he's a good goaltender. San Jose kept him. They opted to move on from Adin Hill. And so we'll see if he's capable of bounce back's probably not the right term. I thought he played well in San Jose. Just Minnesota seemed to lose faith in him, and they moved him, brought in Fleury. So this is a key year. If he has a down year in San Jose, who knows? Goaltending is tough. It's unforgiving. It feels like every year there's 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 different goaltenders. You'll see that, hey, this guy's going to be a starter or a backup in the next year. Gone. Just gone. It's not like football kickers in the NFL, but it feels like it sometimes, doesn't it? For LA, and I mentioned before, Drew Doughty was having quite the season before he got injured, and a lot of that was probably a chip on his shoulder because he wasn't being considered for Team Canada at the Olympics. Turns out to be a moot point. Nobody went to the Olympics, but at least not from the NHL. But yeah, Doughty, really good year, I think, in the offing for him. And it's a key, really, for the Kings. The Kings ended up making the playoffs. They went out in the first round, but they did it without Doughty. And now that Doughty's back, as long as he can stay healthy, that could be something that helps the Kings not just finish third, but maybe finish first. Because that's a question that gets asked too. Do you think the Kings can win the division? Yes, but they need Kopitar not to fall in his production. They need for Doughty to have that bounce back season. And just they need that production from their kids too, right? They need the kids to continue to progress. All right, for Edmonton, I've mentioned this player before. We talk about Puljujarvi a lot. It was mentioned last night too, in between periods during the Vancouver-Edmonton game, and how, Advanced Stats crowd loves him. The fans love Puljujarvi, but the numbers have not backed it up. The traditional hockey numbers, the goals, the assists, the points, the meat and potatoes of it, really haven't borne out the faith that the analytics community has in him. So for Puljujarvi, it does feel like this is maybe his last go around with the Oilers. Now, the rumors out there too that maybe he wanted out of Edmonton make the whole thing seem a little more awkward to me anyways. But Puljujarvi, to me, it's a key year for him with the Oilers. For Calgary, I thought about Markstrom. I did. Considered Markstrom because it's a big year for him coming off of... And the thing with Markstrom was that and I guess it's just bonus content because Markstrom's not the guy I'm going to talk about from Calgary, but here we are. Edmonton was shooting glove side, and that was a weakness he showed in Vancouver at times as well. He has to show during the regular season this year that that's all figured out, and that he's got that again, because if there is that weakness glove side, it can lead to a pretty rapid drop in your statistics if you're a goaltender. But that set aside, Hubertau. Jonathan Hubertau coming over from Florida. He's being counted on to produce at least as well as Gaudreau, and it feels like there's more of a leadership role with him than what Johnny Gaudreau had anyways. We'll see how Calgary's leadership ends up working out for them this year, and who ends up being the vocal leader and the unspoken one as well. Leadership isn't necessarily just about who's the noisiest. But yeah, Hubertau, the expectation is, I would think, at least 100 points from him. And so there's some pressure there, and considering the contract he signed, that's going to add to that as well. And finishing out with Anaheim, anytime I talk about Anaheim, it really starts and stops with their stopper, Gibson. So John Gibson for Anaheim, he is an elite goaltender who hasn't had elite numbers for a while now. And for Gibson, he needs to have those elite numbers. And he said he's happy in Edmonton or in Anaheim and Edmonton, right? If it was Gibson and Edmonton with Campbell, we'd be having a different conversation. But yeah, Gibson, he is, I still think, an elite level goaltender. I think he could be top 10 in the NHL. I don't have the stats to back it up. And I know he's played behind Anaheim's defense. I know it's been a disaster in Anaheim the last couple of years. But if they're going to really get back into the hunt, it's going to be on Gibson, I think, to help prop some of that up and steal some games. So how many of these are goaltenders? Goalie. I just don't know if I've got too many goalies on the board. I know there's going to be a lot of goalies, though. Yep. And no goalies there. So no goalies in the Metro Division, 2 goalies in the Atlantic, 2 goalies in the Central, and 3 in the Pacific. I didn't even put Demko for the Canucks because, to me, Pettersson's the bigger deal in terms of his season could decide whether or not the Canucks make the playoffs. But there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Remember, there are no wrong answers for this. There are no wrong answers. I will get told there's wrong answers, though, because that's what happens. It's the internet, so I expect that. But let me know which players you think are entering key seasons for their career. Maybe it's a guy who's looking to make some serious money next year, and this season could decide whether he gets it or not. Maybe it's a veteran looking to bounce back. Let me know what you guys think. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. If you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.